Throughout history, many wrestlers have found themselves in trouble with the law for a variety of reasons, whether it be current-day superstars or even some of the biggest names of wrestling's past. Wrestling crimes have stretched from DUIs, drunken brawls, and in one case, it resulted in that wrestler being put behind bars for 5 whole years. So let's break it down then as we look at 10 active wrestlers who have been arrested. Liv Morgan, real name Giona Daddio, was recently arrested in what appears to be her first incident involving the law. On December 14 in Sumter County, Florida, Morgan was taken into custody following a traffic stop. The arrest occurred at approximately 6:30 p.m. when a sheriff's deputy observed the yellow Jeep she was driving crossing over the white and yellow lines of a country road. The smell of marijuana would then instigate a search. The WWE superstar faces charges of possession of marijuana, which was less than 20 grams, and possession of drug equipment. Additionally, Morgan was charged with the possession of drugs, potentially synthetic cannabinoids. After the incident, she was booked at 7:22 p.m. and was released on bond at 10:04 p.m. the same day. It's worth noting that whilst the incident was a traffic stop, there is no record of her being under the influence whilst behind the wheel, with the charges simply being for possession and not DUI. While he may often seem like a man too fearsome for anyone to step up to in real life, Brock Lesnar has found himself on the wrong side of the law enforcement on more than one occasion over the course of his life, with his first incident occurring in 2001 when he was arrested and charged with steroid possession. Of course, even if this was still back during his time in the developmental territory of Ohio Valley Wrestling, he was already a physical specimen by then, and so perhaps it should come as no surprise that he fell under the radar of those looking to sniff out drug cheats. That said, in the end, such charges would be dropped when subsequent lab tests revealed that the package that he had on him at the time of his arrest didn't actually contain steroids at all. A second arrest for the Beast would also occur 10 years later in 2011, after being charged with hunting infractions during a trip to Alberta. He would eventually plead guilty to improper tagging of an animal before being issued with a $17,000 fine and a 6-month hunting suspension. This was 2 of the charges were dropped. Over the years, the legal troubles of Jeff Hardy have been well documented, so it should come as no surprise to any wrestling fans that there are a lot to get through here. With that in mind, let's start right at the beginning, as it was in September 2009 that the charismatic Enigma was arrested on charges of both drug trafficking and possession of anabolic steroids. Of course, this wouldn't end well for him, as following a lengthy court case, 2 years later, Hardy was sentenced to not only 10 days in prison and a subsequent 30 months of probation, but he was also forced to pay a fine of $100,000. That wouldn't be the end of his legal troubles as it happened, because years later, in July of 2019, he'd be arrested again for public intoxication. Then just 3 months later, he'd pick up his first DUI after being caught drunk driving in Moore County, North Carolina. At least he'd learned his lesson following such an incident though. Not exactly, as over the years he's been arrested on DUI charges a total of 3 times, the most recent of which taking place not long after he signed with All Elite Wrestling in 2022. Of course, Jeff isn't the only Hardy that's had his share of legal problems over the years, because his brother Matt is also no stranger to getting in trouble with the law, and this has been the case ever since 2011 when he picked up some DUIs of his own. Over the course of 1 month, Matt would be arrested for reckless driving and again for driving while impaired, something that lost him his job in TNA Wrestling. He would then get into a car accident, but wasn't charged, before picking up a second DUI and eventually being subject to a police raid that led to the previously mentioned drug-related arrest. On top of this, 3 years later, in January 2024, Matt and his wife Rebby would both find themselves in trouble with the law when police got a call from a hotel staffer who claimed that somebody's beat the hell out of their wife, before both were arrested on charges of assault and battery before restraining orders were put in place. As one of wrestling's most notorious outlaws, it should come as no surprise to anyone that Nick Gage has had more than his fair share of problems in terms of breaking the law over the years. But while for most others these problems are relatively minor things like public intoxication and drunken brawling, the situation that led to his second and most notable arrest was far more serious. Before that happened though, Gage would first fall under the strong arm of the law in 2005 when he was arrested for possession of stolen property, something that that led to him having to pay a $250 fine as well as additional court fees. That said, his real moment of notoriety came 5 years later in 2010 when, broke and in desperate need of money, he decided to rob a PNC bank in Collingswood on a whim. Unfortunately for Nick though, so last minute was this decision, he didn't have a mask to hide his identity, and this led to him quickly being caught and charged with second-degree robbery. Obviously then, his subsequent sentence was severe and would see him spend 5 whole years behind bars, although he has since returned to the wrestling business with him currently a staple of Game Changer Wrestling and deathmatch wrestling in general, with his past adding to his dangerous mystique. In the second most recent example of a wrestler falling under the wrong side of the law, Cash Wheeler's arrest is still fresh in the fans' memories, partially as we've yet to get the full story behind what happened. What we do know at the moment is that on August 18th, 2023, Wheeler was arrested in Florida and charged with 1 count of aggravated assault with a firearm. This after a warrant for his arrest was filed on July 27, 2023. What exactly did he do to bring this charge about? Well, it's alleged that he flashed a gun at another driver during a road rage incident, and because of that, not only was he forced to relinquish any firearms that he owns, but he also had a bail set at $2,500. Of course, given that he's yet to be convicted, it remains unclear how this will affect his career going forward, but we can confirm that it didn't affect his trip to London for AEW All In at Wembley Stadium, an event that went down just days after the arrest. Jimmy Uso is sadly another wrestler who's no stranger to getting into trouble with the law. In fact, over the years he's found himself being arrested on multiple occasions. As to when the first of these occurred, well, that would be in September 2011 when, after getting caught driving the wrong way down a one-way street, he was given a field sobriety test and subsequently failed to pass. So because of this, Jimmy was charged with a DUI and sentenced to a period of probation that he would break only 2 years later, getting caught driving with a suspended license. Of course, that wouldn't be the end of his legal troubles though, as in 2019, Jimmy was arrested on 2 separate occasions, once in February when he and his wife Naomi were pulled over for driving the wrong way down a one-way street yet again, and then a second time in July when he was caught drink driving again. Needless to say, the 2 incidents led to further DUI charges and fines totaling $450, just as another arrest in July 2021 led to a further charge and bond of $500 being posted. With that said, Jimmy isn't the only Uso who's had an arrest history, as Jay has also had his fair share of issues as well. Though, unlike his brother, he's only found himself in trouble once. But when did this happen? Well, basically, it was in January 2018 when he was arrested for drunk driving in Hidalgo County, Texas, after having only just finished performing at a WWE live event. Luckily for Jay though, this wouldn't lead to a pattern of incidents, because after posting a $500 bond and getting released, he doesn't appear to have shown any indication of being a repeat offender. Charlotte Flair may be a complete pro in the ring that's always in charge of every aspect of her craft, but outside of it, things aren't necessarily so clear-cut. No, taking a page from her father Rick's book, she's been known to sometimes drink a little too much, and on at least one occasion, this has caused her to have an issue with local law enforcement. So what happened exactly? Well, in September 2008 in Chapel Hill, Florida, the Queen was arrested for assaulting a cop after said officer attempted to intervene during a fight which was taking place involving Charlotte, her then boyfriend, and her dad, and it led to her initially being sentenced to 45 days behind bars, though such a sentence was later reduced to supervised probation and a $200 fine instead, meaning any impact the whole incident may have had on her in-ring career was pretty much negated. While he may seem like the picture-perfect performer, somebody who would never do anything to embarrass his employer outside of a one-time drug suspension, Roman Reigns has actually been arrested once in the past. Sure, this took place before he ever reached the WWE main roster, so it wasn't like it hampered his push or anything, but it's a rare stain on his record regardless. Basically, it all goes back to June 2010, when just weeks after signing a developmental contract with WWE and being sent to Florida Championship Wrestling, he was enjoying a few too many drinks in a local bar and ended up getting involved in a bar brawl. Obviously then, this led to the cops being called and a bunch of people, the tribal chief included, getting picked up and charged with disorderly intoxication, unlawful assembly, as well as rioting. He was subsequently released on a $1,000 bond and charged with $500 for each offense. And before you go, make sure you check out 10 facts that MJF doesn't want you to know.